You're not in Kansas anymore, you're on Pandora. Hello and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So in this episode, if you haven't guessed, I'll be discussing the groundbreaking 2009 science fiction juggernaut that is Avatar, as directed by James Cameron. The movie is set in the mid-22nd century, where the human race has now started to reach out into space and have begun colonising a moon in the Alpha Centauri star system known as Pandora. A rich and diverse world full of new and exciting and often dangerous flora and fauna, and an extremely alien landscape to match. The thing is, Pandora, for as hostile as it is, contains a mineral like no other, unobtainium, which sells for thousands a kilo back on Earth, and the biggest deposit of which is sitting right underneath the settlement of the moon's indigenous people, the Na'vi, who aren't exactly all bowled over that we have all but invaded their home world. It has been found, and this is where the movie takes its name, that the Na'vi can be grown with imprinted human DNA and synced to the mind of a human driver, if you will. Such avatars being used to study the Na'vi, but ultimately with a hidden agenda to find and take advantage of any weak spots, to leverage against removing the Na'vi from their home so that the Resources Development Administration in charge of the human mining operation on Pandora can mine ever more unobtainium, regardless of the devastation caused in their wake. One such Marine, Jake Sully, as played by Sam Worthington, finds himself part of the Avatar program and sets off with a covert mission to undermine the Na'vi and report back to the military officer in charge, Colonel Miles Quadrich, as played by Stephen Lang, a war dog who is hell-bent on wanton destruction of the Na'vi's home world. Little could Jake have imagined just how much he would fall in love with the Na'vi, the beauty of Pandora, and indeed find a connection with its people, such that perhaps the lines between where his heart truly lies and his commitment to the mission may not all be that black and white. So, Avatar, what an event of a movie! This is one of the few movies that come along to really kind of redefine our cinematic experience. A true spectacle and total immersement that just doesn't set out to simply give us a movie to observe, but also gives a full-on cinematic journey in which audience participation is mandatory. Stripped to its bare bones, the movie's plot is pretty much thin on the ground. It's basically Pocahontas in space. It's nothing new in this respect. The story has been told many times before. However, Cameron, not always known for his riveting dialogue, doesn't yield from his mission to delight, entertain, and provide us with a labour of love like no other. A movie that required new technology to be designed, tested, and redesigned again before he could even think about jotting down his ideas, never mind rolling the cameras. The world building at play here is like nothing else. There is very little that has ever come close, remotely close, to how involved the world, its landscape, its inhabitants are actually kind of interwoven seamlessly into the fabric of the story. Cameron's vision is painstakingly assembled on screen with the minutiae of detail and concern for connectivity required to really make us believe in Pandora and its people. It's breathtakingly immersive. Every detail is considered, developed from a heartfelt personal story into a fully fledged science fiction epic. That first step out onto Pandora is like we've entered Oz for the very first time. I'm always literally covered in goose pimples as the scope of the planet opens up, as that anticipation builds in learning about this totally alien world. There's also been careful consideration to the science involved. Alpha Centauri, after all, as I believe, is our closest star system neighbour. And although it's still science fiction to think we can actually travel there like they do in the movie, it's still been set out as close as it probably could have been and still make it feel exotic yet reachable, tangible. It does bring in many elements James Cameron has used before. Elements are eerily similar to his 1986 movie Aliens. In fact, I've always thought of this as an Aliens for beginners, you know? It has much of the action, style and basic charisma, you know, of that movie. But indeed without the gore or the horror. Avatar being, of course, much a family-orientated expedition into the unknown. There's also a scene very reminiscent of the sinking scene in his 1997 movie Titanic, and I'm sure I copped a bit of 1995's Braveheart, which was actually directed by Mel Gibson, but then that was probably more to do with the movie's composer, one of Cameron's longtime collaborators, James Horner, than anything else, who also penned the score to the aforementioned Scottish biopic. And indeed, whose score for this movie is as spectacular as the movie itself. But Avatar is more than its own thing. It's a full-on organism, developing, learning, evolving the audience, bending us to its will, storytelling through its visuals and delivery that heighten and enlighten the senses. It's not just a movie, but an entire culture, language, planet, ecosystem, science, each ingeniously kind of interconnected. Even though it's heavy with mysticisms and folklore, there is a backbone and a truth to it. An analogous environmental message with our own world that does hit pretty deep. The motion capture is beautifully done, and it is definitely, you know, has some fun with its characters. There's a very few moments that don't seem real, you know? The world of the Na'vi is brought to life in as much detail as the world in which they live. At times, reality is kind of definitely blurred as much for the audience as it is for the characters themselves. There is a pretty kind of dim view of humanity embedded within the film's main text, to be fair, that we haven't really learnt from any of our past mistakes and travesties, that we're either hell-bent on getting what we want and we're going to have it, mindless, oblivion of another species, or, you know, or that we are all, for the most part, willing to kind of sit back and just let this happen. But for a few. Even Jake was eager, you know, at the beginning, to use the leverage he had with the Colonel, with little kind of regard for the consequences. Still, why do we have to understand something to know enough just to leave it alone in the first place? But that's not the point, is it? They have something we want. But ultimately, it's an absolute crowd pleaser. Big, bold, self-indulgent and totally oozing bravado. I mean, the movie is designed to be as big, emotive and posthumous as possible. This is Cameron's command through and through. Overall, Avatar is cinema at its very peak. A fantasy adventure with total audience immersement. An absolutely groundbreaking movie where every pristine detail has been considered, willing Cameron's wonderfully alien world into existence. It's a basic idea. The plot itself is nothing new and really draws on the human race doing what they have been doing time and time again, attacking and removing other cultures in order to get rich. But it's the way the story is told, through its imagery, its design, its connectivity, that puts us right in the centre of this amazing world and the action that is going on all around. There are more than a few kind of fists in the air moments, I can tell you, and certainly it feels earned. It's really hard not to get kind of swept away into it all. The technological advancements alone required to bring Pandora to life was nothing short of amazing. And what Cameron has created here is beyond anything else being released at the time. It's a time capsule of the advances made, a showcase of what can be done when you are 100% committed to that end result, finance aside. Plenty of other movies, even made today, have blown their wad on a lot less. There's always something new to learn around every corner, and for me, Avatar continues to be a true cinematic experience each time I have dared to step foot on Pandora for myself. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, Please leave a like, please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions and other movie related content. Absolutely loved having you at SciFirst MovieTalk and definitely love to have you back. Most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.